So sickle cell disease is okay. So we would say it's a spectrum. Let me put it this way: it's a spectrum. But basically, what is wrong in this disease is that this person has a different type of hemoglobin, if you like. Now, this hemoglobin is such. I mean, there are over 200 types of hemoglobin that people could have, but this particular hemoglobin is such that the moment the red blood cells that carry oxygen, the moment they are exposed to any bit of hypoxia, if it stays long enough, the cells would deform. They will change into a sickle shape, okay? And
Hypoxia meaning low oxygen, right?
low oxygen. And this is something that happens on a daily basis. So like when your heart pumps the blood, the red cells carry this oxygen from the lungs, they take them to the tissues, and as the red cells are passing through the tiny blood vessels in the tissues, the oxygen is being taken out of them and being replaced with carbon dioxide. And that's the hypoxia we're talking about. Now, if they stay there too long, now for the rest of us okay, for the purpose of this discussion, let me say hemoglobin AA. So for most people who are hemoglobin AA, it doesn't matter how long the red cells stay in the small tiny vessels before they leave. The red cells don't deform, they don't go into any abnormality. But for those who are HBSS, now when those red cells stay even just a second or 2 seconds too long in that scenario, then they become deformed. Now, some of them, when they get back to the lungs, when they get oxygen, if that happens quickly enough also, they would go back to their robust, donut shape, and everything will be fine. So we talk about this sickling and unsickling. So it happens, if you like, there is a maximum number of times that any given red cell can sickle and unsickle before it becomes permanently sickled. Now, when it becomes permanently sickled, it needs to be cleared out. Okay. And so it is this excessive clearing out of red cells that sort of becomes if you like, that becomes the life of this person. So red cells are being cleared out at a much faster rate than the bone marrow can cope. And so they go into anemia. Okay, this story is generally true for most hemolytic anemias, really. But for sickle cell, this is what happens. It is this sickling and unsickling that continues to happen every second of the day. So let me put it in perspective. Every minute, the heart will pump 60, 70 times.
Right.
So which means 60, 70 times in a minute, the red cells are exposed to this hypoxia. Not all of them will obviously sickle, otherwise the person will die instantly. So maybe a percentage of them will sickle, and then they unsickle in the lung, sickle, unsickle. So by the time they reach that number where they can no longer unsickle, then they become so-called irreversibly sickled. So we say these are irreversibly sickled cells. Let me use PCV because that's an easier number to use. Let's say the person should have a 45% PCV, okay, or red cell level, if you like. Now, for a sickle cell patient, the numbers that we tend to get are usually in the low 20s, okay, or even lower. So now for a sickle cell patient, the person is living with, let's say, 22%. Just for example, I'm just picking a number now. The person is living with a 22%. Now, when this malaria happens or any of these infections happen, it drops suddenly to maybe like an 18 or a 15% during that period. Now, that's when we say there's a crisis.
Yeah.
It's not like there was no problem before. There was some problem, but it was manageable. The person was living with it and everything was sort of compensated. But then you get this sudden dip and it becomes a problem. For most people who are, let's say, on the 40, 45% hematocrit level, if they get a malaria and a 45 drops to a 40, they would barely notice it. Their body system will barely notice it. But if you are living on 22 and you drop to like an 18, now that's a big drop because it was already very low before.